Welcome, and thank you for joining today's ASPPH Presents webinar, The Latest Trends in Fundraising COVID-19 edition. I am Crystal Jones, the Director of Development and Alumni Relations for the IU Richard M. Fairbanks School of Public Health and a member of the Development and Alumni Relations Assembly Leadership Team. I want to thank Heidi, Natasha, and Emily, who are members of the Development and Alumni Assembly, for coordinating this informative and timely topic in our current roles. We will be accepting questions through the chat function at the bottom of your screen, which we will hold for the end. Our speaker, Dr. Bill Stanjikavich, serves as an Assistant Dean for External Relations at the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. In addition, he serves on the academic faculty while directing the fundraising school. He also oversees the college's fundraising as well as marketing and communications. The fundraising school provides research-based training on effective fundraising practices. The school's resources include public courses, custom training, webinars, and podcasts. The fundraising school's alumni meet or exceed their fundraising goals at higher rates than the national average. The latest trends in fundraising COVID-19 edition will highlight what we know about charitable giving during the pandemic and how fundraisers can best plan for fundraising in 2021. Thank you for presenting today, Dr. Stanjikavich.
Well, Crystal, thank you so much. And I know all of your members are performing such invaluable service during this historical world pandemic, but I do just want to give a shout out to you and your colleagues, excuse me, from the Fairbanks School of Public Health. The work that you're doing here in the state of Indiana to help our state and inform our state government related to testing and spread and solutions, working in partnership with our university's medical school is truly extraordinary and shows the value of public health schools, public health institutions. Now, I will say at the fundraising school, we do teach that the most important tool you need is your case for support. And I would just ask you, please do not bring on another pandemic someday to strengthen your case for support, okay? We have lots of other good reasons to support our schools and programs of public health. But Fairbanks is wonderful, and I know the members of this program across the United States and across the world are as well. What I want to do is take a few moments and let you know where we've been with fundraising, where we think we are with fundraising, and therefore use that information to plan for fundraising in 2021. As I do so, please submit your questions through this online software, and Emily Jackson's going to be taking a look at that, and Crystal's going to be taking a look at that, and they will interrupt me as we go. So I really want you to be able to, as you see there now, the message being sent to you, to be able to stop wherever I am and answer your question right away. That said, if we have some time at the end for some additional questions, we can go to those as well. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at where fundraising was at the end of 2019. And I know right away you're thinking, I wonder what other workshops there are. Why are we looking at data from 2019? Can I transfer to one of the other workshops? Don't, because there's an important lesson here from 2019 that informs where we are today and as we plan for tomorrow. So very important to notice this $450 billion, nearly $450 billion in charitable giving in 2019. That is the second highest total in recorded history after adjusting for inflation, meaning as 2019 ended, we had a significant amount of fundraising momentum carrying into the year 2020. Those of you who live in coastal areas, you think about that water coming up the beach, the tide comes up the beach. Well, with charitable giving, that tide was coming up and coming up and coming up and still coming up and had not yet receded back into the ocean. So that previous momentum is something we need to keep in mind as we think about what might be happening today and as we plan for 2021. As for the breakdowns of where the dollars came from, a very typical breakdown is normal. It does look like individuals provide 69% of the giving, but actually the number is quite higher than that, because about half this foundation total are individuals putting money into their donor advised funds. And of course, bequests are made by individuals. When you add up the 69, and let's call it 8 percentage points for foundations, that's 77 plus 10 for the bequests, 87% of charitable giving comes from individuals, and then foundations and corporations for most nonprofits supplement the rest of our fundraising portfolio. We look at trends dating back to 2017, and we see overall, after adjusting for inflation, charitable giving about breaking even over this 2-year period, down 0.2%, mainly because of the decline in individuals that occurred in the 2018 calendar year, which we ascribe primarily to the changes that happened with the revisions in the federal tax code at the end of 2017. That we really have this hypothesis that a lot of individuals fast forwarded their 2018 giving into 2017, or held on to some or most of their charitable giving in 2018 and then started giving again in 19, primarily to see how the new tax policies were affecting charitable giving. But you see foundations, bequests, and corporations all up over a 2-year period, and even individuals up strongly in 2019. Where did this money go? And again, the kind of subsectors are the same as they've always been, with religion leading the way, followed by education. About 2/3 of education is post-secondary education. About 1/3 is K through 12. Human services, we see health over to this extent here, and the rest of the categories typically follow in this order. But here's something important to take away from 2019, and that is 8 of the 9 subsectors went up faster than inflation. And that is absolutely remarkable. Now, the year before, in 2018, these are the gold bars here, about 3 of the subsectors went up, 3 of them went down significantly, and the other 3 pretty much broke even, held par, kind of 3, 3, and 3 of the 9. You move to 2019, 8 of the 9 went up faster than inflation. And in fact, when you look at 2017, all 9 went up faster than inflation. And that was only the 6th time in 50 years that we saw that kind of a development. So again, another example on the strong momentum of charitable giving heading into the year 2020. By the way, in case you're wondering, the one subsector that did not go up faster than inflation in 2019 was giving to international affairs. That's kind of a mixed blessing, because from the United States, a preponderance of giving to international causes is often associated with natural disasters. You know, the tsunami hits Sri Lanka, or, you know, there's an earthquake or a flood, a typhoon, that sort of thing. And in 2019, there were fewer of those, and the international giving numbers reflect that. Okay, before we move on then to think about the pandemic, one question we get all the time is, hey, this was an election year, and I read in somebody's newspaper, on somebody's tablet, heard on somebody's on-air news show, that between the 2 major party presidential candidates and all the federal candidates for House and Senate, that they spent more than $4 billion on their campaigns. And in fact, that spending is going to continue now here in the United States with the 2 Senate seat runoffs slated for Georgia on January 5th. And people naturally wonder, does giving to presidential campaigns diminish charitable giving? Is that something I should be worried about here in 2020? And the answer is a resounding no. And the data show us why that is the case. And we can use 2012 as a recent, very simple example. President Obama running for re-election against then Governor Romney. And for the first time ever, both major party political candidates spent more than $1 billion each on their campaigns. Well, yeah, in fact, 2.1 billion total. What was charitable giving that year? 316 billion. And not only was that number so much higher than the dollars spent on the presidential campaigns, that was up 3.5% overall, and in fact, even 1.5% higher after inflation. And that is very typical in a presidential campaign year. In fact, if you look back at the last 8 presidential campaign years, charitable giving has gone up faster than inflation in 7 of the 8. And the only one that charitable giving did not go up faster than inflation was 2008, when Senator Obama was running against Senator McCain. And of course, the decline in charitable giving really didn't have anything to do with the presidential campaign, and everything to do with the fact that Lehman Brothers crashed in September and took the entire economy with them and started the Great Recession. And so again, you should not be concerned that when there's a presidential year, that charitable giving is going to go down. As you can see from these numbers, the presidential giving, and you can have your very well-intended concerns or thoughts or advocacy based on dollars spent for election campaigns. Just in terms of the dollar amounts, the giving to presidential campaigns isn't even a nickel in the philanthropic sofa cushion. So again, we see some support there quite a bit from the data. Now, getting back to what we can be thinking about now. So I told you I was looking at the 2019 data, but also to help us understand what could be happening now and how we can plan for 2021. The first thing I have to tell you is I love this slide. Now, fortunately, my wife is not home with me right now. She's working at her place of work, and she's not on this webinar. So I can tell you, please just keep this on the down low. This is going to be my holiday gift to her. This is going to be the artwork that we put in the family room above the sofa. I love this bar chart, and I know she's going to be thrilled. She's going to weep when she sees this is my gift to her during the holidays. I think it'll be tears of joy. So anyway, let's take a look at this. First of all, the gray bars is charitable giving when the economy is normal. The gold bars is when the economy is in a recession, okay? The line graph here that I'm following with my cursor, that is what's known as current dollars, the value of the dollars in the year they were donated, all right? But we want to make an apples to apples comparison, so we adjust for inflation, and we put all the giving data into what's called constant dollars. So all the dollars are now worth what they would have been worth in 2019, and that gives us these bars to adjust for inflation. So first thing, in terms of current dollars, we see an increase from 1979 to 2019. And think, well, maybe that was just keeping up with inflation. Well, no. If we drew a regression line here, we would also see charitable giving going up at least as fast, if not faster, than inflation over the last 40 years. So that's positive takeaway number one. Number two is that the gold bars even exist. Remember, the gold bars show charitable giving during recessions. And we think, well, there's going to be a recession, so charitable giving is going to crater. It's going to go away. Actually, that's not the case at all. So charitable giving continues. That's number two. Number three, check this out. Charitable giving only suffers minor declines typically during an economic downturn. So you see here, 1979, the economy slows down, got 80, 81, and 82. 80 is about the same as 79, and 81 and 82 even go up a little bit despite the economic downturn. Here's 89 into 90 and 91. Yes, charitable giving goes down a little bit after adjusted for inflation, but not dramatically so, right? We see here, what is this, 2000 to 2001, and then 2001 to 2002. So charitable giving from 2000 to 2001 just goes down a little bit. The downward trend did continue as the economy improved, right? But the decline is not steep. The one exception being the Great Recession, and we'll see that in a slide here in a moment, where the decline was more significant. But yet, even during the Great Recession, the gold bars even exist. We don't see blank spaces here like a child who's lost a tooth. The bars are still there. Now, number four, what happens when the recession ends? Charitable giving not only tends to go up, but go up dramatically. You can see that from the bars here. Charitable giving tends not to just go up, but go up dramatically, meaning not only do Americans continue to give during a recession, but then there's this latent desire to return giving to previous levels and more so. As other people come back into the economy, regain their jobs, get their household budgets stable, there's this latent desire to return to charitable giving. And so that's why we look at these data, not as a prediction, not as a guarantee, more like a weather forecast, to determine what the day could be like. But certainly there's a lot of cause for optimism if we can endure and be resilient now when the times are toughest. Last point on this bar graph are these last 6 bars here, starting with 2014, are the 6 most generous years in charitable giving ever. Another sign on how strong the momentum of charitable giving was heading into the pandemic, meaning if you look at all of these data then comprehensively, that as the economy continues to slowly improve, let alone if we see dramatic improvement when the pandemic ends, we can have optimism that charitable giving is at least going to return, if not exceed previous levels. Last point, then I'll move on. These data from Giving USA are published by our school. We do the research, but then they are presented by Giving Institute. And this is a national nonprofit of fundraising experts and fundraising consultants. And the gentleman who ran Giving Institute in 2019, 2020, when these data were released, a gentleman by the name of Rick Dunham out of Dallas, Texas, his prediction is that charitable giving in 2020 is going to be at least as strong in 2019. It is going to be at least as strong as it was in 2019. Not a guarantee, but Rick's saying he would not be surprised if that were to happen. And remember, 2019 was the second best year ever in terms of charitable giving. So will we see declines? Maybe. Certainly different subsectors are affected in different ways. Different regions of the country are affected in different ways. Those with higher unemployment rates, those that are more dependent on the airline industry. You think about the nonprofits such as the arts and animal welfare and the environment can really suffer during times like this. Conversely, human service organizations tend to do well during times like this. If your economy is driven by the home manufacturing and home improvement industries, or in Indiana, we're a big logistics state. A lot of things get shipped from and through Indiana. Well, a lot of online shopping right now. So again, each nonprofit is different based on your subsector, based on your region, based on your local economy. But as a whole, you can see at least 6 positive takeaways from this bar chart here, which is why it's going to be my holiday gift to my wife. All right. These data here, these bullet points, just put the empirical numbers to the points that I was making from that bar chart. And you can see here again, in an average year, charitable giving goes up about 3% after inflation. You take out the recession years, charitable giving tends to go up about 5% a year after inflation. During a typical recession year, charitable giving basically breaks even, goes down 0.5% after inflation. Great Recession, certainly an outlier of more than a 4% decline. Charitable giving based on these economic downturns, geared towards these economic downturns, tends to happen in the first 16 weeks. So wherever you tend to live, let's just, for a common denominator, say we all started our economic lockdown on March 1st. I know in Indiana it was a couple weeks after that, but just to keep the discussion simple, that takes March, April, May, and June. Meaning by July, the COVID-directed charitable giving just because of the pandemic should have started to subside. And then donors would start returning to the nonprofits that they typically supported. And I can tell you, we don't have data on that yet, but anecdotally, as I teach around the country and around the world in these virtual formats, I'm hearing that from nonprofits. The human service folks were saying, wow, those first 3-4 months, we were getting so much more money from so many new donors, unsolicited. And then, about July and August, it kind of stopped and slowed down. I'm also hearing from others like the zoo or some of the arts organizations going, August and September, we started to see our donors come back to us. So again, those are just anecdotes, but the data show typically it's that first 16 weeks when charitable giving is concentrated just for an economic downturn. All right. So we do have an early snapshot then. So that looks at historical data and what do we learn from history that is not a guarantee, but can inform our fundraising planning moving forward. Now we take a look at a snapshot of what donors are telling us they're doing during the pandemic. And this research was done by our school, the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, through our Women's Philanthropy Institute. And they conducted a survey, and here was their first finding, which is supported by that bar chart data, that people continue to give even during times of economic downturn. A full 79% of people responded to the survey stating that their charitable giving would stay the same or even go up despite the pandemic. They're saying, nice try, COVID. Not going to fall for it. I'm going to continue my charitable giving, even if you're ravaging the world. I'll show you, right? 79%. In fact, in the early months of the pandemic, 1/3 had already made a gift in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Charitable giving pretty much staying the same for the majority of US households. Of course, we would love for that to go up, but it's not going down. It's at least staying the same. And when you think that we slammed the brakes on the world economy for a couple of months, That's really quite an interesting finding to see. Now, of those that did stop giving, very understandable reasons, right? Health and my household economics. Either I have COVID or I'm worried that I will get this disease and have negative ramifications, maybe suffer a death in our family tragically, of course, all these worries that people have understandably during this present time. Or economics. I've lost my job or I could lose my job. My hours have been reduced. My hours could be reduced. And so I'm just going to hang on to my dollars. In fact, we're seeing that with the savings rate data where Americans right now are saving about 20% of their income, which is about 4 times greater than where we were before the pandemic. But then here's one other important takeaway from these data. Of the households that have stopped giving during the pandemic, the group of donors most likely to stop giving are single women. Why is that important? Married households, regardless of race, always are the most active in terms of charitable giving. But single women have always run a close second. Single men are third and last. And so this very substantial donor group is the donor group that's saying they are kind of most likely to reduce or stop giving during the pandemic. And we've always sort of had a notion why. And there was some interesting information, a New York Times story just last week. I put this on my Twitter feed if you wanted to go take a look and find the article that shows that women have borne the economic brunt of the pandemic. Usually during a recession, it's men who suffer the greatest job loss, it's men who suffer the greatest income loss. Not so this time. That the areas of the economy that are most strongly hit by the pandemic tend to be those where women are predominant. So, not just the service industry, but even think about the airlines and the hospitality and tourism and areas like that. We have more women out of jobs right now than men, as we're still about 10 million jobs fewer than where we were back in January. So, number one, women are more likely to lose their job than a man right now. Second of all, whether we want this to be true, we know sociologically it still is, that women still bear the largest share of household responsibilities. And so not only have they lost their job, they're also still caring for the children. Or if they've kept their job, they're still caring for the children. They've kept their job and their child's school is closed. And so now they're running the Family Academy of Online Learning from the dining room, right? As they're overseeing their children's online learning. The child care centers not open, and mom has to negotiate the child care for her child. Or women who are caring for their parents, those of us who have elderly parents. And we know our seasoned citizens are, and your public health schools have pointed this out, have borne the strongest brunt of this, the greatest amount of isolation. And now maybe, middle-aged mom is also caring for her seasoned citizens' parents while also trying to figure out her job situation. All of these reasons could very well help us understand why single women are the most likely to have stopped donating right now, which as fundraisers is a very important takeaway. Because as Crystal knows and others know who are fundraisers, what do? We welcome people into our organization, often through our annual fund, and then we watch who donates for consecutive years. And when somebody donates for 3 or 4 years in a row, they are inviting us to invite them to donate at a higher dollar amount. If they've been donating at $1,000 3, 4 years in a row, we might ask them for $1,500 or $2,000. If they've been at 2,500, we might ask them for 3,500 or $5,000 after 3 or 4 years, right? Or some might even have greater amounts of wealth. And the initial annual gift was just to get to know us, kind of a get acquainted type of a situation. We do our wealth screening and see that they can make a 5-figure gift, maybe even a 6-figure gift, right? Well, we need to keep in mind with our neighbors who are single women who have stopped their giving. It doesn't mean they're no longer interested in our nonprofit. It doesn't mean, of course, it doesn't mean they're no longer generous. It just means for this particular moment, they're not able to continue their charitable giving behavior. Keep that in mind when you analyze your donor database. When you're looking for who's given 3, 4, 5 years in a row, well, now Ms. has stopped her giving for all these reasons we've been talking about in these last few minutes. Don't exclude her from your analysis just because she had a year or two of a gap. Let your stewardship continue. Keep her informed. Maybe there are other ways she can be engaged. Keep her informed and engaged on social media. Invite her to whatever online events that you're having and maintain that relationship. So when she is able to return to her charitable giving, you still have that relationship with her. And again, don't leave her out when you're doing that database analysis just because of that gap. Okay, we're in a crisis. Don't be like Kevin in Home Alone, right? That's a movie we're going to be seeing, the infinite number of times between now and December 31st. Instead, remember what the British were saying during World War II. Keep calm and be a leader. All right. One thing you need to remember right now is crises are normal. It's so easy for us in our present age where everything is just so quick on social media, where we have microwave oven mentalities, remote control, television mentalities. That this actually is not unusual. This happens about once every 100 years. One of my favorite stories that I've read recently, Shakespeare wrote two of his greatest plays during a pandemic while they were all socially isolating, right? This happens about once every century. And as leaders, we just need that mindset. And then there's so much that's uncertain, new information every day, every week, every month, to just know that as leaders, we like to have certainty in our decision making. You're not going to have that now, and you need to give yourself space to understand that. Your decisions won't be perfect. Try not to make permanent decisions, make provisional decisions that can be changed and that can be reversed as new information comes along. Don't overestimate yourself. Don't feel like you have to be Wonder Woman or Superman and have these magical superhero powers. No, invite the whole team. Let everybody know that they're in this together. And especially now more than ever, your title is not persuasive. Crisis leadership is not just about making the big decisions. It's about involving everybody, making the best decision today, and leaving yourself room to make an adjustment as new information comes along. So acknowledge that complexity, have that vision. Look, I found this image. Isn't that great? She's one with the oversoul, as Emerson taught us, right? She's just at peace, serene. Okay, it's not going to be quite that simple, but acknowledge that there is complexity. That's okay. Allow that in your decisions. Leave yourself room to make provisional changes as new information comes along. All right, so when we look at crisis leadership, and this does affect your fundraising, the research shows that the very first thing we do is we save lives, the lives of our staff, our volunteers, our participants, anybody associated with our organization. And take a moment now and think, what did that look like at your school or program of public health when your dean, your program director, your governor, whoever the case may be, said, shut it down, you have to go home? Who were the first people you were thinking about, and what steps were being taken to protect their health and safety, right? Then the next thing we do is we save our stuff, our buildings, our computer infrastructure, our financial resources. We have a fleet of vans, whatever that might look like. We then save our infrastructure. Think about in your mind, what did that look like? Were we set up to work from home? What changes did we have to make to adapt to working from home, sheltering in place? Did we still have to go into the workplace? If so, what steps did we take? And so forth. Think about those in specific terms, because then the third step is that you save and build trust. That it is your reputation is either being weakened or enhanced by how you took those first two steps. And what I want to encourage you is you've always had your fundraising case for support on why donors should support your school or program of public health. But now the steps you have taken as a crisis leader can be grafted into that case for support to further enhance the legitimacy and credibility of your organization in the eyes of the donor. Because fundraising happens at the speed of trust. Donors love stability. Donors, of course, need to be passionate about the cause, but then they need to trust the people and the organization that are advancing that cause. And the way you've led through crisis leadership and continue to lead during this era should become part of your story that you're sharing with donors. Some of the research steps on how to enhance revenues during time like this, actually the first one is adding new programs. In fact, more successful nonprofits add programs and not take them away to develop new revenue. More typically known and understood is the cutting of programs. It usually only happens after the fact instead of leading an efficient organization to begin with. We also look for opportunities for collaboration, although that typically happens between organizations that are strong, not one that's strong and one that's weak. So we need to collaborate from positions of strength. Opportunities for earned income. Are there things that we can sell? And then lastly, this area of advocacy can be a time during crisis to increase revenue for our organization. It really makes a lot of sense because by advocating, you're out in the public square, you're on that op-ed page, you're out in the media, ways that you're promoting public health can create visibility and awareness and help people see the unique value of public health schools and programs. So advocacy can be a way during times like this to increase our revenues. All right, let's now think about fundraising now and planning for the future. And the biggest thing we need to remember is that we don't have one economy and we don't just have one actor within the economy. We don't just have one type of donor. We have different economies that are affecting different people in different ways. So, when this all started, I remember back in March, I saw some predictions in the national media of people saying, we're going to need 10 years to rebuild the economy. Kind of a backslash. Kind of think of that airplane just, crashing into the ground and smearing into the earth. That's what people were saying about our economy. And then others were saying, no, it's going to be more of a U shape. Yeah, it's going to plummet straight down during the lockdowns and it's going to stay down, but then it's going to shoot right up, similar to people advocate for the V shaped recovery. In fact, the V shaped recovery is what we saw in the United States after the last world pandemic. We've all heard the phrase the roaring 20s. Remember that? The roaring 20s and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Gatsby and jazz music and wealth and prosperity. The roaring 20s happened immediately after the last world pandemic, 1918, 1919. Would be great if we had the roaring 20s again, right? In the 21st century, that would be a V-shaped recovery. What we're starting to see though now from the data is that we're starting a V-shaped recovery, but we had the initial decline. Then let me take that back. We had the initial decline. Then we started to see improvement, but now the improvement is starting to moderate, right? So we had the huge increase in unemployment, the huge increase in job loss, the huge decrease in consumer spending, all these types of things. And then as spring became summer and summer started to move into fall, we started to see the unemployment rate really come down strongly. We started to see the number of people employed go up strongly. The number of people filing new jobless claims continue to go down. We saw third quarter gross domestic product number up substantially, about 7-8%, huge increase, one of the largest increases ever. But now we're starting to see those numbers just kind of level off a little bit. And now we're going to see the harder work, the slower climb that could still take a year or two, perhaps, is what I'm seeing from economists, for us to get back to where we were at the end of 2019 and the start of 2020, which is why you hear a lot about this so-called K-shaped recovery. So the stem of the K, again, can be viewed as the entire economy just plummeting down as the world went into economic lockdown. But as we've come out of lockdown, we're really seeing at least two groups of people. There are folks like myself, like a lot of folks in this webinar, we can work from the safety behind our laptops and the safety behind the closed doors of our homes. We still have our full-time jobs. We have fewer places we can spend our money. Disney World's closed, can't get on a plane to go to Europe. And so, people have more money, and where are they spending it? I talked about home sales, home improvement, things of that nature. Big ticket items is what we're seeing being sold right now. Those folks are doing well economically. Then there are the folks in the service industry, the folks in the airline industry, the folks in the hospitality and tourism industries who have lost their jobs. And it is going to be a long while before those jobs come back. And so be thinking about that as you look at your donor base and prospective donors, is how is this pandemic and economy affecting them? Because there are still some people who candidly are just doing quite well economically still, despite the health challenges that we see. This is backed up in the data. So again, on the upper trend of the K, we see folks have stable income, stable employment, have money to spend, money to donate. The other group of folks, not so much, not employed, not a stable income. And this is backed up by the unemployment data. So you look at the end of October, the unemployment data that were released the first Friday in November, 6.9%. Really, when you think about all we've been through in 2020, not so horrible, right? You could think it might still be double digits. It took us years to reclaim jobs after the Great Recession in what has taken months since the start of the pandemic. However, two groups of people. The folks in the upward trend of the K tend to be folks with education after high school, a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, a workforce certificate, military experience, something like that. Their unemployment rate is just 4%, which if we had a national unemployment rate of 4%, we'd be doing cartwheels down the street, right? For folks in that downward slope of the case, some of them who do have higher levels of education, but many of them have that high school diploma or less, we're seeing an unemployment rate that is double of the upward slope of the case. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your donors, thinking about prospective donors. There are still people in a position to donate today, and you should be in touch with your donors. If they've made an annual gift, you can thank them for that annual gift, and maybe at the end of the year, ask them for a special gift. You can be asking them to increase their giving as part of your case becomes we're losing donors and we have higher costs because of the pandemic. So again, in that group of folks, there's still opportunity to fundraise, which is why Rick Dunham said he would not be surprised to see charitable giving match 2019, which was the second best year ever. That other group of folks, here's where stewardship comes in, communication continues, where we stay in touch with them during these challenging times until financially they're able to live out their values and their passions philanthropically with their charitable behavior. Crystal, I saw a question pop up. Did somebody want to interject with a question?
Sure, that was a reminder. I've gotten a few questions actually. One is that, in your opinion, because of the hot topic being public health, how can academic institutions, specifically public health institutions, position themselves to hold on to their base or find new donors?
So during an economic downturn, our best fundraising is always from our current donors. The research shows that donors tend to stay with the nonprofits that they've had a deep, strong, trusting relationship with all along. And candidly, what you need to be doing there is continue to keep those donors informed. And I know early on in the pandemic, fundraisers were asking, should I continue to fundraise? And the answer is absolutely yes. I mean, when you think about people who are sheltering in place, or even those who work outside the home but still spend most of the time in their home after work, and they're watching the news and they're seeing all the challenges and all the stress and feeling the loneliness and isolation. And here you come as the fundraiser. Remember, at the end of the day, philanthropy is a message of hope. We have the audacity to believe that we can make the world a better place. And you're bringing that hope filled message, that hope filled information update to that donor. They may or may not give, that may or may not even be an opportunity to ask for that next gift, but definitely stay in front of your current donors through stewardship in all the different ways that you can think of. Some of them, until this most recent wave in the last couple of weeks, we were hearing stories where maybe the donor would sit on her front porch and the fundraiser would be down on the lawn in a lawn chair. The two would sit on the driveway more than 6 feet apart. People were more willing to maybe meet in some of those open air coffee, sidewalk cafe type situations. Now, of course, we're seeing a big difference as we head into these winter months. That might need to be scaled back, but stay in front of your donors. The biggest challenge right now is going to be finding new donors. And I'm not suggesting that you don't try. I'm just encouraging you to have modest expectations because, again, during difficult times, donors tend to stay with the nonprofits that they were supporting all along.
Thanks. Another question that I've received is regarding messaging around single women. How should our organizations use their funds to keep them engaged and make those ask and provide education about what our schools are doing during the pandemic?
3 words: empathy, empathy, and empathy, which is always part of fundraising, but to communicate that, checking in with donors. And it's not all single women. There are single women who are doing well economically and are continuing to donate. And that's fine. And you would know that about her because she has donated. But if you're seeing that, the annual gift, 2020 comes and goes, and she didn't donate this year, uh, you know, now we know that there may be something that the data are showing us to explain this behavior. To just stay in touch. How are you? How's everything going? I'm understanding actually that donors like you, and by the way, normative messages are often very strong in fundraising. People like you tend to do this. People like me, then I should do that. To be able to say, look, we understand that single women are bearing the brunt of this economic downturn and bearing the brunt of the additional home and family care during this pandemic. And so we understand that. And we want to just stay in touch with you. Here are our updates. Let us know how we can help. And we're going to continue to walk alongside you during these difficult times. Just those messages of stewardship. Remember, stewardship are ways to communicate and stay in touch with our donors that don't involve always asking for a gift. And those are the types of activities we need now with any of our donors who lapse. which our data say more likely than not could be single women.
And then the final question that I had is just thinking about our audiences and our alumni most likely being the individuals on the front line during the pandemic. Any advice for messaging around fundraising to those first responders?
First of all, thank you, thank you, thank you. Right? Again, acknowledging, we always acknowledge where our donors are at. Remember when we fundraise, for those of us who are fully able, we have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. That means we should be observing and listening 80% of the time when we fundraise. By the way, my marriage got way better when I figured that out, right? And all my relationships with my kids and my friends, right? Observe and listen to our donors as much as we can, and do that with all of them, including these frontline folks, and to just celebrate them and thank them, express empathy and knowing what they're going through right now during these challenging times, and do that and say also, since you are employed, you know better than anybody else how challenging this is. You know how you were prepared by our program and by our school. And we want to continue to fortify our important profession, which the whole world now knows is invaluable. If they did not know that before, would you please make a gift? Again, with great sensitivity, first and foremost, to their current situation. Remember, fundraising is the gentle art of teaching the joy of giving. You know how you feel when you donate, volunteer, even do somebody a favor. There's that feeling of joy, that feeling of euphoria. That is scientific, that is biological, that is how we are knit together as human beings. And we don't ever want to deny anybody that opportunity to experience the joy of giving. Even a frontline first responder during a pandemic, properly communicated. So I would just encourage you, you know your alumni better than anybody else. You'll know those messages of sensitivity and empathy that can lead the way towards also inviting them to experience the joy of giving. In fact, maybe you would have put it in those terms. You haven't had a lot of joy at work, you've seen a lot of heartbreak. We know that giving can provide joy, and we need to continue to fortify our profession. Would you make a gift? All he or she can say is no, right? And you just express those in empathetic terms. Well, Crystal, continue to interrupt me as the questions come along. I want to look again at some data now. We looked at the economic data. One of the big numbers to watch for here is we have about what, 5 or 6 weeks left of the calendar year 2020, is the S&P 500 stock market. What you see here in these line graphs is the gold line is the S&P 500 in constant dollars measured by 2018 value of money, and the blue line is charitable giving. And if you notice, when the stock market goes up from January 1 to December 31, 12-month period in a calendar year, the following year, charitable giving tends to go up, not by the same percentage, but certainly in the same trend direction. In a year when charitable giving goes down, then the following year, when the stock market goes down, the following year, charitable giving tends to go down, not by the same percentage, but in the same trend direction. The S&P 500 is closely correlated. It is such a strong predictor of next year's fundraising. In fact, the correlation has not happened. It's fewer than 10 times in the last 60 years where this correlation hasn't held up. And maybe 2021 will be that next year. There are no guarantees. But this is a very strong predictor. And so that's why we keep an eye on where we are at the S&P. Why is this? It's also very intuitive, right? First of all, when this stock market goes up, people can get this intangible feeling of wealth and financial stability. We also know that our foundations have their dollars invested in the stock market. And if they have to give away 5% of their money, 5% of a bigger number is a bigger number that they now need to give out in grants. A stock market that's increasing tends to indicate that much of the business sector is doing well and can bode well for business giving. So for all these different reasons, the S&P 500 is a nice barometer to watch. And when I look back last Friday at the market close, I didn't check today, but the market closed on Friday at 35.57. That is 10% higher than where we were on December 31st, 2019. So the number to remember is 32.30. 32.30. That's where the market closed on December 31st. And then take wherever we are on December 31st, 2020 and subtract. If it's a positive number, now you know the percentage increase. If it's a negative number, you kind of know the trend data heading into the following year. So one good statistic to watch as you do your planning moving forward, knowing, by the way, that the best predictor of your 2021 success are your current donors. The best predictor of somebody's charitable giving is their charitable giving to your organization in terms of how recent, how frequent, and at what amount. So we stay close to our current donors. That is your number one predictor of what next year is going to look like, including with your foundation and business relationships. But then at a macro scale, data like the S&P 500 and understanding economic trends like the K-shaped recovery can help inform us. Remember, people give out of philanthropic motivation and they give out of philanthropic values. That's the why that they give. Okay. These economic factors, these so-called wealth effects of giving, often determine the how much and the when of giving, and it all integrates together when we're making our ask. All right, so a couple other points here as we have about 15 minutes left in this session. And again, please continue to send your questions and Crystal will interject as necessary. First of all, to keep in mind, this is a great time to be thinking about donor advised funds. This is a white hot topic in the philanthropic sector right now, as more and more people are opening donor advised funds, especially in the private sector economy. What we tend to know about people who hold DAFs, they are our most strategic donor. Now, there's a concern that some of these folks are just putting the dollars in their DAF and getting the tax write-off. And, you know, did they put up a DAF and create a parking lot, to kind of borrow off the old folk song from back in the day? Certainly, there are some people who are doing that. But by and large, folks with a DAF tend to be our most strategic donors, mainly because these are folks who want to set some money aside for charitable giving. And it's easier to just set up a DAF than to create a family foundation, which is what a lot of folks did back in the day. Because a family foundation, I have to start a nonprofit. I need a board. I need to do all my reporting all the time. And, you know, all this record keeping. With a DAF, I just put my money in, somebody else holds on to that DAF, and I advise them on where to send it. Easy. And I can just do the thinking about where it goes. Some people use their DAFs to save and bunch dollars to make larger gifts later. This can also be saving and bunching dollars to teach children about charitable giving as the whole family starts to kind of decide around the DAF. Some people create a DAF when they have a so-called liquidity moment. They sold a business, they inherited money, or maybe inherited land and sold that land, things like that. And then, of course, some donors create a DAF to remain anonymous, although our school's latest survey shows that about fewer than 10% of donors want to stay anonymous as the reason for creating their DAF. So we know this is a thing. This is why people tend to create and how they use their donor advised funds. And so if you know individuals who have them, this is a good time to be talking with them about their DAFs. As you see the data again on how strong and robust we've seen the emergence of DAFs, especially in the private sector in the last few years. You look at the Philanthropy 400 published by our good friends at the Chronicle of Philanthropy, 4 of the top 10 destinations of charitable giving were these private sector donor advised funds. What we do know, while there are important concerns about our DAFs becoming a parking lot, in any given year, about 2/3 of the dollars that go in tend to be donated out. So in 2018, about 29 billion went in and about 19 billion came out. Now that 10 billion stays in there, I get that. But 2/3 going in and coming out in any given year. And so here's what some research from Professor Dan Heist and Professor Danielle Vance McMullen have found. We like to brag on them. They are both alums of our college as they now teach elsewhere across the United States. That after the Great Recession, the number of donations from donor advised funds went up, the dollars went up, and the percentage of the DAF portfolio going out to donations also went up. Not a surprise. Remember, DAF donors tend to be our most strategic donors. And what better time to be strategic than during a world pandemic? All right.
There was some questions about the stimulus funding.
Mhm.
If there was any data that showed, did individuals create more donor advised funds after receiving stimulus funds, or was there any giving trends around the stimulus earlier?
We don't have data on that yet. It's something our school is currently taking a look at. We'll have one study come out in December and another one in January that might give us an indication. Again, I can only speak anecdotally. I serve on the board of a food bank in central Indiana. I also volunteer with some fundraising advice and strategy for another large human services organization in Indianapolis. and both of them unsolicited were receiving these gifts of $1,200. Why 1,200? It was the stimulus check. Numerous gifts of $1,200, and I've heard stories like that across the nation. So no data yet, and of course that's something to keep an eye on, right? There's negotiations right now in the lame duck Congress. Should there be another stimulus package? And of course, that becomes a moot point after January 20th with a new presidential administration and a newly seated Congress. Maybe the winds will change and change views on stimulus. So it's definitely something we should keep in mind as fundraisers, that if there is another stimulus, and not just this, the PPP where the money went to the employer to continue to pay salaries for people who are furloughed, but truly when the checks are going straight to individual people, to be thinking that the folks who are still employed, who are still doing well economically, might just be willing to send some or part of that or all of that stimulus check to a nonprofit they support. Okay, so we'll take the last few minutes here to always offer this reminder of where our boards of directors need to be. And you need your boards now more than ever, right? And even if you have an advisory council or an advisory board, if you don't have a governing board, they still have these responsibilities that you see here, monitoring being their internal responsibilities, boundary spanning being their external responsibilities, and conforming meaning their legal responsibilities. Some of you might be more accustomed to this duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience that our good friends at Board Source use. Quite frankly, I think everybody should care, be loyal, and be obedient. I can never tell what goes under which of those three. Where monitoring to me is internal, boundary spanning is external, conforming is legal. So it's very easy for me to remember. But the same responsibilities are on both lists. They're just shuffled a little bit differently. And at times like this boundary spanning responsibility of our boards becomes more important than ever before as they're reaching out to their external relationships to tell our story, to let them know how we're enduring through this pandemic. And yes, to look for prospective donors to help us think through the risks of the health situation, the economic situation, the political strife that we might be feeling, right? What are those risks to our nonprofit? And of course, our board members need to be our first donors and our first fundraisers now more than ever. Very few boards have 100% board giving. In fact, fewer than half do, according to the data from Board Source. In fact, one survey showed that so this one researcher, he interviewed 169 board members and said, who should you be talking to outside of your nonprofit? Who are the external stakeholders? Just give me the list. Anybody you think of. This is how many said donors and prospective donors. None. And so we have fewer than half of boards with 100% board giving, even though board members need to be the first donors. And we have too many board members not aware that fundraising and prospecting are part of their boundary spanning responsibilities. So when you look at the research, and this is a study I just completed earlier this year, that when we communicate expectations for fundraising to our board members when they're being recruited, the odds of those board members being engaged as donors and fundraisers are 11 times higher than when we don't. Give you a peek behind the research curtain. When we talk about odds ratios, if the odds are 2 to 3 times greater, we're thrilled. That's a substantial finding. That means we've doubled or tripled the likelihood of something happening. If we're communicating expectations to our board members as they join our boards that we expect them to give and we expect them to fundraise, the odds of them doing so are 11 times higher than when we don't. I interviewed some nonprofits with 100% board giving. This is what they found. This is what they discovered, that they were very clear in their expectations. In fact, as I interviewed them, I have to tell you, they almost thought, surely, Bill, there's something else you want to talk about. Of course, we communicated expectations. Why wouldn't we? They were just very matter of fact that, of course, that they would be doing this. So perhaps you can put together a memorandum of understanding, listing all the board responsibilities, include this in your board manual, continue verbal communication, and keep your boards engaged with donating and fundraising. And the last point I'll make, and I'll conclude here because we have about 5 minutes left, I'm sorry, I think that was me. If you, Brian, if you need to get back up on the screen, I apologize. Is with our boards, boundary spanning, getting out the door is always part of their responsibility, and we need them to do so now more than ever. So again, when we look, kind of summarizing what we just looked at today, Charitable giving in 2019, very strong, very robust, second highest total ever after adjusting for inflation. We saw 6 straight years, the best 6 straight years of charitable giving ever heading into the pandemic. We still see nearly 80% of donors saying that they will continue to donate at least the same, if not more, despite the pandemic. Those are especially true of the people on the upward slope of the K in this K-shaped economy. And then, of course, we're going to be remaining mindful of other economic indicators, like, for example, the stock market. Let's see here. If I do that, like the stock market is an indicator that we can be watching as an indicator, while the most important thing we can be doing as fundraisers is to be staying in touch with our current donors with empathy, with information, with communication, inviting them to continue to give at a higher level, to give a special gift on top of their annual gift, because times are so challenging now. So Crystal, let me conclude there. People see my email address if they want to email me their questions, also my Twitter handle where I tweet about fundraising and leadership. But any last few moments for either communication from your organization about the event, or last comments or questions people might have about this presentation?
Well, if we have just one more minute, I think these questions can feed into each other. One was requesting your best guess on the holiday charitable giving season with Giving Tuesday, and just advice about messaging so that when we invite those gifts to those who are able, we don't look tone deaf to those who are in a tougher position.
Best guess on Giving Tuesdays will continue to see an upward trend. Giving Tuesdays just continue to go up from one year to the next. Now, you asked me for a best guess. That's not a guarantee. So my best guess plus, $4, I'll buy you the hot fudge cake sundae at Frisch's, or wherever your favorite dessert place is. And then again, all the communications, of course, need to be with empathy, need to recognize that times are tough. Check in, ask, how are you economically? I just wrote the annual appeal letters for our college. And before getting to the ask, we inserted a paragraph that just said, we understand that this economy and this moment in time is affecting different people in different ways. And we will understand if that is causing you to adjust or change or revise your charitable giving accordingly, which was a nice way to say, we'll understand if you don't send a gift. We're not going to be that explicit about it, but we called it out. And then after that paragraph, we then went on to say, if you are able to maintain your charitable giving this year, would you please give a gift of X to this particular scholarship, this particular fund? So just have empathy. We're all being challenged right now. Your donors are as well. And communicating in that way lets you know that they are not just a walking wallet. They're not just a wristlet. They're not just a purse to you, but they are real people deserving of dignity, being treated as living beings with beating hearts who care deeply about your organization and joining you in making the world a better place. You go make the world a better place. Let us know how we can help. Stay in touch with my email address if that's helpful moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation, and thank you for everyone who attended today's webinar. A recording of this will be available to attendees and to Development and Alumni Relations Assembly members who weren't able to join live. I hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving despite all of the ongoing challenges. I know at my house, we'll be cooking our first turkey in 13 years of marriage. So wish us luck, and I hope you all have good luck as well.